streaming twice. All right, see, there it is. Now it says it's live streaming. All right, if it just started, then here you go. So are we on air, Jeffrey? Do you see a live stream?
I see it, but it doesn't say live. Let's hit the refresh button. Now it's live. Yeah.
All right. There you go. I don't know where it started, what you guys saw. So anyway, we'll go from there. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are watching on YouTube, you can find out more information about officehours.global. And first hour is general discussion every day, 7 days a week. If you've got a question about media or virtual production, we're here for you. So jump in, ask questions, and we'll go. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little more time on today. We don't broadcast the next 2 hours after this. So at 8 o'clock, we will switch over. We'll bring our educators in, and then we have an education broadcast. And they like to speak freely, and so we don't put it on YouTube. So anyway, that'll be the second hour. Then remember that if we sent out in the email an announcement that gives you a a link to where you can watch the Belfast method later today at noon, coming out from Todd Reynolds. All right, now I am going to pull into the panelist view and hand it off to Emily and Dennis. Go ahead, take it away.
Morning, everyone. Welcome. Oh, I'm back, so I missed you guys. I was going to say welcome back to you guys, but you guys didn't go anywhere. I did. But anywho, let's go ahead and jump into the questions today.
Our first question today comes from James in Dublin, Ireland, and he asks, with the limited connections available on M1 Macs, how do the panel maximize those ports? How do you prioritize direct connection as opposed to connections running through a hub?
Roscoe.
Well, the good thing is on the Mini, you do get the 2 slower USB ports, so that's where your keyboards and stuff plugs in. On the laptop, you only have the 2 ports, so I always prioritize audio. Audio is the one thing that if you run it through hubs and various things, you can create a lot of artifacts. So the first thing I'd worry about a direct connection would be audio, and after that, you just have to kind of test your hubs, and the different OWC is a good brand to go with. Test the different equipment that works and see what may or may not create any kind of clicking issues. But again, audio I'd put in direct.
Rupert?
Just try and keep all your secondary devices out on hub. So, anything that isn't real time or high bandwidth.
Mark?
So I found some good devices to expand upon the ports that are there. I like this Anchor one because it has a number of different ports and types. It's got your USB-C, HDMI, Ethernet, and USB 2.0. And then I also like, just for the HDMI, this one, the Unis that Alex recommended before. But I'm really waiting for the OWC to come out that has the 4 extra Thunderbolt ports on the bottom of it.
Nice. All right, next question.
Our next question comes from James in Ireland again. Do the panel have a preferred method for connecting monitors to get the best results from the hardware? HDMI, Thunderbolt, DisplayPort 1.2, DisplayPort 1.4, or DisplayLink? Does it really matter which protocol you use, and are all the results the same?
Sorry, interrupted. Rupert.
I mean, it is nice to try and standardize. I mean, I try to stick with HDMI, and the real thing is adapters. I mean, if you've got a static setup, then you can fix it one way, but if you're adapting things, or you're moving around, or you're trying to integrate with different hardware or different bits and pieces, then if you truly try and standardize, you might back yourself into a corner. So adapters, lots of adapters.
Roscoe?
On the M1 laptop, I like Apple has an adapter that has an HDMI out, but it also allows you to charge the computer, or keep the computer charged while you're using it. So that's a nice little addition there. On the M1 Mini, you have an HDMI out, and I prefer HDMI. DisplayPort is there for gaming people. Usually you get faster response times to the monitor, is that the right word, for gaming people. So that would be, if you're a gamer, then yeah, obviously maybe look into DisplayPort.
David?
Yep. My primary rig has a GTX 1650 card, which has 1 HDMI, 2 display ports. So the 3 display rig I have uses all 3 of them.
All right, next question.
Next question is also from James in Dublin. What is the most efficient way to connect dual monitors to an M1 MacMini while maximizing port use? Daisy chain, hub, or 2 direct connections?
Rupert?
Again, I like to try and keep monitors as direct as possible. So if you've got direct connections, try and use them. If you're going to go through a hub in that scenario, just make sure you, or a dock, I guess in that case, make sure it's as good a Thunderbolt as you can get to go through there.
All right, next question.
The next question is from Mike Beardmore in Reading, UK. And he asks, when would the 16 gigabyte memory be needed in a Mac Mini M1 with video, audio, and mobile app development?
TJ?
If you are doing app development and you are also doing audio and video, or you are doing audio and video app development, the more memory, the more horsepower you can get in your machine, the better. It always pays off to maximize your buy upfront. It will last you the longest.
Excellent. Next question.
Our next question is from Scott Mueller in Germantown, New York. And the question is, how are you avoiding having way too many keyboards and mice on your desk when you have 3 PCs and 3 Macs going? I use Sharemouse and it's okay for certain situations, but not entirely reliable.
Roscoe?
I'm a mostly Mac person, but I do use Chrome Desktop Remote, which is a cross-platform application. So if I had PCs that I do have a couple that I get to that way, but pretty much other than that, Apple sharing is probably the number one thing I use.
Dave?
Yeah, for keyboard and remote and mouse, I'm a big fan of Synology. You can have it span across multiple computers, and in case you get lost, there's a way to have hotkeys to bring the mouse to whichever screen you need it to be on. It's a paid app, but it's pretty reliable.
That's cool. TJ?
So I have 6 Macs in front of me, all being controlled by one computer, and I'm controlling 3 or 4 PCs at the same time. For the Macs, I use the built-in desktop sharing, and for the PCs, I use Microsoft's remote desktop control. The client for Mac is fantastic. It's free, and it just does an amazing job. And with that, you can have, the way it's set up, you can do desktops, so I can flip between the Windows PC and my Mac using the Spaces control. It's brilliant.
Cool. Rupert?
I wasn't sure if the question meant a total of 6, but I guess it does. I have several computers around me. I tend to go for the smaller keyboards, and I use the ones like just this little thing here, like for the smaller deal. And this is primarily my Zoom area. I do a lot of other productivity stuff here back there where I have bigger keyboards, but here I try not to crowd myself and just use the smaller keyboards.
And Guy?
Yeah, I'm using a combination of what everybody else has already said. So Synology to move my mouse around. I do have a traditional KVM, just a cheap one, because sometimes when you do a restart, and maybe there's a trick around this that somebody could tell me, you need to access to the physical keyboard to pop stuff in. So unless you have auto login. And then I use Teradici for my cloud stuff, RDP for local. So I have like a NDI discovery server in the other room that sometimes hiccups, so I have to get into it to maintain it. So I RDP, just same app, Microsoft RDP on the Mac, and get over to that PC. And then I have a B-Link downstairs that's kind of my universe machine right now that I'm tapping into with Parsec. So I Parsec into that one, and it's like being there. And same with my cloud instances, I Parsec up into those, and sometimes Teradici, sometimes RDP. So combination of.
All right, next question.
Our next question comes from William Hillary in Glenburn, Maine in the US. And he asks, how does one build an inexpensive teleprompter? Is 24-inch ideal?
Jeffrey?
So my first teleprompter was actually a Amazon box, a piece of plexiglass that had a film on it that created the reflective thing, and a Dell monitor, which the monitors at the time, you had to take one piece out and it would turn 90 degrees. So it'd be nice and flat. Put the monitor on top of that. That was super inexpensive. The keys to it, of course, is the glass, and then being able to get the camera blacked out through a sock or something like that. Or in my case, in the box, I painted the box black so there'd be no light that would be coming through here. Now, inexpensive. Now, these types of teleprompters will go pretty much $80 on Amazon. So it's gotten pretty inexpensive. So it's worth looking into one of these instead of building from scratch. And I'll let Alex talk about the 24-inch size, if that's the good size.
Alex?
Yeah, so I think the 24 is pretty good. I mean, we've gone bigger. So as far as Delaware, this is larger than life. We built this in a large White House. Anyway, so but that is you make them. All you have to think about is 45 degrees, or that you're going to reflect it. You need any piece of glass, or not any piece. You have to decide whether you want to do 60/40 or 70/30. But outside of that, you can buy that kind of glass almost anywhere in a major city. There's definitely a place that will sell it to you, and then you decide. Now that's probably one of the larger ones we've built. We built ones that come out of a case at 55 inches for kind of virtual connections. And so I've kind of gotten into the habit of, I think that at the 12-inch one, I have a little ICANN up here that I'm not using at the moment for a variety of reasons. But the 12-inch I find is too small. I think 24 is pretty good. I'm probably going to build one that's a little bit bigger than that. And I'm going to build it all right now. My plan right now is to use MakerPipe to try to build it. So I'll lay out all the plans as we keep on working on it. So Monday I'll probably show you a rough design of that in our second hour of what I'm planning there. The main thing is just being able to have that 45-degree angle so that it's sort of reflects back to you. And then the other thing to remember is you need duvetine in the back, or something, or velvet, or something that's going to suck up all of the light that's around it. So you can the problem that I really get into is that I feel like once you go over 15 inches, they become pretty expensive, the teleprompters. And at that point, at under 15 inches, I think it's easier to buy them. At over 15 inches, I have leaned towards building them. So because then you have a lot more flexibility. The big problem I have with the teleprompter in general, which is why I'm not using this little one, is that putting everybody in it is too hard to see. So I'm going to be experimenting with larger ones. And what I like is, if I don't like the larger one, I didn't spend $2,500 on a 24-inch. I spent a little bit on MakerPipe, which I can just cut more pipe and build it, make a bigger one, and use a slightly bigger monitor. So that's kind of why I'm kind of leaning towards building my own, as opposed to doing that. It'll let me refine the idea. That's it.
All right, next question.
Our next question comes from TJ Asher in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and he asks, after doing some filming last week and filling up two 1 terabyte Samsung T5 drives, I've come to the conclusion that my 48 terabyte Synology box is not going to be sufficient. How are people dealing with this issue?
Alex?
Usually what we have to do is we have to decide about things being online versus nearline. I mean, when you start generating you can't keep everything in an online storage. I think at our height, PixelCore was generating 15 terabytes a week. And so you just get to a point where you have to figure out what needs to be there and what doesn't. Now, some of that has to do with, I shot a bunch of footage that I don't need. You don't want to throw it away, but a lot of times we put that back on primary and backup spinning drives. We just put them on, a primary and a backup spinning drive. If you keep on coming back to those every 6 months and do a quick search, throw them in the toaster, do a quick search, pull them back out again, they'll last for years. I mean, we didn't lose any for a decade. And so that it works pretty well. We do have 2 of them just in case, but I wouldn't worry about it too much. But you do have to think about online versus offline, because you can't keep everything online at some point.
Roscoe?
8 terabyte Seagate drives. Whatever drive is not the largest one, you go back usually the one smaller configuration. You get the most terabytes per dollar, and that's the way that projects are getting nearline storage. And then I actually have a computer at school that does nothing but push stuff up to Dropbox, because it takes a week to load 8 terabytes or whatever up into Dropbox. So it's a really slow process. So I don't recommend it for the average user, but that's the only way. So,
Mark? Oh,
whoops, sorry. So we've been using something from 45 drives called a Storinator, and it's neat because when you open it up in the rack, you can just drop in the drives, the spinning drives, right into it. So it can hold a lot of drives. We have 160 terabytes on one.
What can you explain? I'm sorry. Can you explain the Storinator?
So yes, the Storinator is basically a Windows. It can be, I guess you can run Linux or Windows on it. We run Windows Server on it. And then you put the OS on it, just a fast drive. And then those drives, if you can, let me see if I can click on the picture here. No, it's not going to zoom in. Wait a minute. So these are the drives. They just sit right here in the bay as you open up the chassis, and the motherboard's back here in the back. So you can just load this thing up with, 14 terabyte drives.
And it doesn't act like a RAID. It just does
Ours is RAID 50 or RAID 6, I think. So you can, it has a RAID card in it, and you just program it however you want to set up the RAID.
Cool. Sorry.
That's okay.
It's got a cool name too.
Yeah, Storinator. I had designed something a long time ago. The idea was we had all these drives, and I said, what I really want is a low power, low access drive that you can access stuff. So I just want to be able to put 1,000 drives into it without it acting as a RAID. And I have to request files, so I just put the drives in, and the idea is it only runs one drive at a time. But you can make requests for it to pull things down, and it goes to the right drive and grabs onto those and pulls them down. And the idea is that you wouldn't have to, it'd be very cheap to build for 1,000 drives. And then it would do all the scheduling where it just spins the drives as needed, and keeps them, just every day, it just kind of goes, it just does a little search every once in a while to keep the drives active. But outside of that, you don't have to have the huge backplane and everything else. It just keeps the drives active. And then I decided when SSDs came out, it was not worth trying to work on. Anyway.
Roscoe?
So Mark, just real quick. So none of those drives, when you're in the RAID configuration, none of those drives can be configured so that you can push a project there and then pull that drive and walk with it? Or can you do that?
I don't know if it's plug and play or hot swappable. But even if it's hot swappable, they're all in a RAID, so you don't want to pull them out.
So they are all part of the RAID. That's what I'm saying. You can't.
No,
there
are other slots for M.2s to use as bootables. I'm sure you could configure it so that you could slide your files over to another M.2, but there's USB drives on the back of it, so you could throw a big USB drive on the back.
Very good. Thank you.
David?
And just back to the Storinator, we were or have been a NetApp shop, NetApp appliance, and their drives are particular. Is this like off the shelf drives you can just drop in there, mix and match, or are they specific firmware? And
so they will sell you SATA drives. We went with SAS drives to get a little bit more performance out of them, and so I just bought the SAS drives on Amazon and threw them in, and they still gave me the warranty as if I bought them from them.
And mix and match size?
No, not. I don't think you can do that with RAID. Okay. I think RAID you have to use all the same size drives.
Cool.
TJ?
Yeah, with RAID, your smallest drive size tends to delineate the maximum storage. So if you have like a bunch of 10 terabyte drives and one 4 terabyte drive, it treats them all as a 4 terabyte drive essentially. So you end up wasting all that extra storage. And this Storinator thing really reminds me of the thing that Backblaze pioneered many years ago with their storage, where they have, they've got oodles of petabytes now stored in these big rack-mounted things with 45 drives in each one, and they just use off-the-shelf hard drives that they just go buy at Best Buy or wherever they're sourcing their drives from. And Backblaze, if you don't know, has a quarterly report on their hard drives usage and reliability. It's worth looking up.
All right. Next question.
Our next question is from Josh Fingold in New York, USA. And he says, Better.com did a mass layoff of 900 people by group Zoom. It leaked online. How would you have shot a video like this? Would high quality audio and video have made this better or worse?
Rupert?
I haven't seen it, so I don't know what quality the audio and video was to begin with. But something like this is obviously a delicate situation. I think you would need it to be clear, intelligible, and professional. But it may not be the time to spend a lot of money on production that might send the wrong message. Having said that, dealing with a mass announcement like that, you have to be pretty realistic that it's going to be seen outside your intended audience one way or another. So you have to build in a little of that perception consideration into a project like that.
Roscoe?
Soft lighting, soothing music. I like the fact that the people who are getting this information are hopefully in a comfortable home environment. So when they receive it, they're in a protected environment where they feel secure.
Jeffrey?
There was more to this than just the fact that he laid him off on Zoom. So that's what really got the news right there. Especially because they got a infusion of money or something like that. But it's really just the quality of Zoom. If you've got a 1080 Zoom room, you recorded it at 1080. If you got a 640 Zoom room, you record at 640. And yeah, I don't think you're going to put too much thought into production of creating a video like that, because you don't want it to leak out in high quality.
David.
Yeah, I don't think there's any good way to lay off that many people, especially this time of year. I've been part of one of those teams once, and it was very unsettling personally. If anything, it should have been handled on a one-off, one-to-one kind of meeting, and not en masse like that, in my opinion.
Alex?
I have to admit that I would have preferred to get the video than have to deal with someone in person, like with them laying me off. Like I'd rather just not. I'd rather I had to do a map. It wasn't quite as many people as he did, but it was my whole company at one point, and so the phone calls were hard. They were probably one of the hardest things I've ever done in my whole life. And so I can say that you don't want to. The thing that he did, and there's so many bad things that they did on this layoff, but it's not about you, like as the person laying people off. It's about them, and it's about, and his was very much about him. He just has a narcissistic problem. But you have to realize, I mean, the reason that one of the big reasons that my company didn't make it was because I wouldn't lay people off, and you have to always remember that, labor is the most expensive part of the company, almost always. Had I done what he did, I probably still have a company, and I'm fine with not having a company now. It's much better. So I think that it has to get done. I think I would have done it if I was going to do it over for 900 people, I would have used a better camera and a better angle, and I would have made it feel more personal. Probably would have impacted some people a little bit more positively. You have to get past all the messaging that he did about how he feels about it. Doesn't matter how he feels, like, about that, and so there's a piece of that puzzle. And then from the layoff perspective, you just have to always be building your network, and that's how you help other people around you. In all parts of the industry, whether it's in the company, outside the company, when you're helping other people, you use every position you have, you use it to help other people move forward and have a great experience with you as well, and always know that it could happen at any minute. That's my approach. So anyway,
TJ? Oh, whoops, sorry.
Yeah, just like David, been through it. Nothing is really going to improve it if you are the person getting laid off.
All right, next question.
Our next question is from William Hillary in Glenburn, Maine, and he says, Guy Cochran has a monitor that renders a KVM switch unnecessary. How does this work?
So this is that same software that David and some of us use. It's Synology. So this is the quad right here, and basically I could move my mouse. If you can see, as I'm going from quadrant 1 to quadrant 2, that's Synology doing that. And then if I go all the way to the end of the screen, far right, that's going to go to a Mac Mini, and then that goes over. So I did a quick Jamboard. Emily should be proud that I used Jamboard. So you can see this is the quad monitor right here. That's the laser pointer on it. And so I could go from 1, 2, 3. This is actually the prompter monitor over here. So it's just a duplicate of 2. And then this Mac Mini is spanning two of the quadrants. And then if I move the mouse all the way over, it'll go over to my MacBook. So Synology is controlling 3. So the yellow computer, the blue computer, and the pink computer. To put it very simply, like Emily would in a 3rd grader. Hope that helps.
Yes, it does help for everyone. David?
Guy, is that big 43 LG? Because if I'm not mistaken, it has a USB-C hub kind of built into it.
So yeah. So these two are being, I believe these are both HDMI, and then this is USB-C, and then you can go in with the remote control and you can pick, what you want it to be. So any of these monitors can become the whole thing. So I could say I want Mac Mini monitor 1 to take over the whole 4K display, or I can do a side by side and do it'll get really skinny, but I can do two up side by side. So it just depends on what you want. And I get this from Jeff Keithley. He has like 5 of these, and then he puts a computer in each one, and it gets crazy. You can do like 50. He did 50 instances, AWS instances to monitor in his trailer. It's nuts. But yeah, that's the monitor. It's like $600 on Amazon.
Wow. Mark?
David, I think the monitor you're talking about is this LG that has 4 HDMI ports in the back of it and some USB ports, USB-C ports.
Yeah, I have
So
one in my
you can
living
put
room.
4 different cameras on it, but I don't know how you would control it. I think you still need a separate keyboard.
Right.
4 different computers, but I
And
think
I-
you still need a separate keyboard and mouse for each one.
I'm pretty sure that there's a hub. So if you had a computer, USB-C, that one could drive it, but I don't know. I have it in my living room, and that's what I use for a TV. But one day I'll bring it into the office.
All right. Next question.
Our next question is from Scott Muller in Germantown, New York. And he asks, is there a better or worse format for video playback on Zoom? If meetings are 720p, is 1080p ProRes 422 HQ overkill?
Alex?
Yes. yes, it is. You're not gonna. HQ is not gonna. You're not gonna see anything going through. HQ is not going to. If you're using that as your conform for playout, you're not gonna. It's not gonna compress better than LT. It's just more. It's more. You can push LT out. No one's gonna tell the difference. Don't use proxy. Proxy is Apple's version of I don't care about my ProRes. And all kinds of bad things happen with proxy. Don't ever use that for anything. But even editing. So, but LT is going to look. It's still way better than the live WebRTC. Now, for us, we're streaming to YouTube, and we're doing we're testing right now. For instance, 10-bit output for that. We would want to use HQ because we want that 10-bit representation. So if we're not, but going through a WebRTC system, I would be blown away if you see a difference between an HQ source and an LT source going through a WebRTC pipeline.
Guy?
Same thing that Alex said. I would just make sure that if you are recording or if you're going to another higher quality place like YouTube or Vimeo, that you do go with at least. I wouldn't do LT myself, but so just because it dumbs it down into Zoom, if you're storing that thing for playback later for archive, then I would still go with just regular ProRes, or HQ is not overkill to me. I mean, it just depends on how long the segment is and how long you want to, how much storage you have. You might want to get one of those things that Mark Giuliani has.
I think that the issue is we work with a lot of shows where we're capturing 10 ISOs of that are 6 hours long, and the difference between HQ and LT for us is terabytes. And so for us, we just go. You can't. I mean, I definitely very carefully pick every format that we use based on what we think will, where we think it'll go. But you're right. I mean, it's just that you just don't want to have too big of a container for too small of a bottle of water. So.
Next question.
Our next question is from Vincent Alvarez in Bellingham, and he asks, I was host for a Zoom webinar. The guest presenter had to be made a host, not just a presenter, in order to be able to turn on her camera. Otherwise, she saw a message that the host has stopped video. Is this normal behavior, and is there a setting I missed?
Rupert.
So when you set up the webinar, you schedule it, there is an option for enabling video for host. And then enabling video for panelists. So I think by presenter, you're meaning panelist in this case. So this is an option when you schedule the webinar. The other thing that may have happened is I think when you're in the webinar, if for any reason you may have muted or stopped their video by clicking on them, I think they would not be able to start their video again until you maybe allowed it. So that may have happened in the webinar itself, maybe.
David?
I think in webinar, there is settings that additional toggles to allow people to start or stop their video. And that's on a per event thing. But everything else Rupert said, spot on.
TJ?
Yes, there are additional settings. And here they are in the panelist view. There's a more menu option. And allow panelists to start video is the thing that you want to enable.
All right. Thank you. Next question.
Next question is from Scott Muller in Germantown, New York. Can the panel explain what they have on each multiple display and where they are positioned on their desks and why? What do you keep front and center?
All right, we got a lot of people for this one, so keep it concise, guys. Rupert?
I've got a bunch. I'm just going to talk about my main workstation here that I'm using. I've standardized for a long time on 3 24-inch monitors, one straight ahead, one to each side. When I'm in this deal, I tend to keep gallery view and then active speaker at the top of this window, and then have my switcher to the right and notes to the left and things like that. If I'm answering a question, I'll bring notes up right next to the camera also, and then I have a bunch of others, but that's enough for now.
TJ?
So here, my primary display, this is where I'm doing most of my work. Secondary display over here where I have my meetings, Teams, and Zoom running. Display over on this side is where I'm doing other work, where I have controls or email or things like that. The monitor up here is the monitor that is mirroring the ATEM so that I know what I see up here is what is going out over the ATEM.
Great. David?
I've got a 24-inch Dell touch panel in front of me that's split going into a little 7-inch Interatron, and a pair of LG 34s on either side that I can put whatever I want. It has a software similar to Guy's Big 43, but it's all in software, so I can intelligently split those two displays into 4-ups or 3 columns or what have you. Pretty cool.
Roscoe?
I use a laptop, so I have one display and I just have lots of windows that I can click on back and forth. There's some windows I won't click on right now, but I can get down here to my audio hijack. I can see what my levels are doing, so just one monitor works.
Jeffrey?
Yeah, for me, it depends on what I'm doing. So for office hours, I have my main, I call this the confidence monitor. That's the one where the camera is in front of. So I can see you guys. I can see all the information. Then I have my 2 monitors over here. My main, technically this one right here is my main monitor. This one's my secondary monitor. And what I like about this is if I'm doing any type of interviews where somebody's showing a presentation, I can look over here for the presentation. It kind of, I feel that some people feel that I'm keeping my attention on the presentation instead of looking at the camera. So every time, like right now, I'm looking at Emily, I'm looking straight forward at the main monitor for the Zooms. But of course, that can change depending on what I'm doing.
Tony?
So my setup is it's got a little piece by piece setup, but it's interesting setup. So this is the teleprompter, and that's the speaker view. And here is my main monitor. Right now, what you're seeing is us. But behind that is 2 different Mukana panels. I didn't want to show that. So I have them separated out. And I also have both the panel view and the speaker view on the teleprompter, but I'm not doing that right now. Here's an iPad that has office hours chat on it. That is my YouTube on another iPad. So I'm watching what is going out on YouTube. And here is the multi-view out of the ATEM. And so that's my setup.
That's a lot of screens. All right, Dennis.
So I have added screens recently after getting an ATEM. So I have the multi-view in front of me underneath the teleprompter where I can see the question. To the left of that is my Mac just here, which has the main Zoom window plus Mukana and Discord. There's an assortment of everything else that's open on the next monitor. And the final monitor, which is almost behind me now, is where I can share my screen, but I can also see that on the multi-view, so I don't have to look at that monitor directly most of the time.
And Lois.
Well, I've got one Mac, one camera, but I have lots of windows. And so I have a large screen and I have different apps open showing different things, Mukana, Discord, us. But pretty simple.
And Michael.
Yes, I have a HPZ 27-inch monitor with lots of windows open. So I have over here, I have the Zoom session. Over here, I have the Mukana. On top, you can't see it. I have a Brio camera and an iPhone here, and just a nice little setup for myself with windows.
All right, next question.
Our next question is from Paul Valhus in Austin, Texas. And he asks, can Guy Cochran give us an in-depth tutorial on the LG OnScreen Control software?
I don't know how in-depth we can do in 1 minute, but we'll give it a shot. Here's a Petapixel article showing it off for photographers where you can see it's a quad, and basically that's 4 full HD 21.5-inch displays rolled into one for $600. It's a native 3840 by 2160. And then you can see in the back, you got the 4 HDMIs and a Displayport as well as a USB-C and a couple super speed USBs. So here's the layouts where you can switch with the remote control. So the remote control, keynote, here's the remote control. If you push this button on input, you can actually tell it what you want each of those quads to contain. So you can say, I want HDMI 1 to be on the upper left or upper right. And then if you press this button, the PBP/PIP button, that's what it lets you select between those different displays. So here's picture in a picture. Here's the side by side. And then, so like if you're doing a gaming thing where you got like Xbox and 2 people playing, it'll be squished and you could set those squeeze settings as well. So that's about all I got for that. Hope that was enough, Paul.
As I mentioned, I have the same display Guy has in my living room for my TV, but the computer monitors I use are LGs as well. And this is the same software, but native to it. So you can click through the different layouts. It'll populate the screens however you see fit on the fly, up to, 8 up if you wanted, picture in picture, picture by picture. And it comes in kind of handy, for getting the most out of the real estate. It's a 4K monitor, so it's in essence 4 little 1080s in software.
All right, next question.
We go back to Dublin in Ireland for our next question. James asks, what is the best dock to go with an M1 MacMini? Is
Jeffrey.
it still the OWC, or have the panel found anything better?
Sorry, Jeffrey.
Well, it really depends on what you're planning to do with the dock, if you need more of one thing versus the other. The 3 major ones, other than OWC, that I can think of are Razer, and then, of course, Kensington makes a Thunderbolt 4, and then CalDigit makes the CalDigit Element, which a lot of people have been buzzing about for an alternative to OWC. Other than that, I know that Dell's working on a couple docks that some people are really interested in, but nothing else. It's limited pickings there when it comes to Thunderbolt 4.
Roscoe?
Exactly what Jeffrey said is wonderful, except just remember that OWC does make different models of docks, so I might go with that.
And TJ?
I'm going to take the flea flicker and throw it to Alex, because Alex has a favorite dock that he's been showing off for a while.
Right.
I will say I have the Saatchi, but if the OWC had existed when I was looking for them, I would have bought the OWC. so the Saatchi's fine, but the OWC has got more features to it. So it's and a lot more expensive. The one that I have is probably $100, and this one's like $300, and so they're different levels of scale. But the Saatchi one works fine for $100. It's great. It has it's got a SD and micro SD, 3 USBs and a USB-C coming out of the front. And a headphone jack. A headphone jack out of the front of the Mac Mini is useful. Anyway, that's it.
All right. Next question.
Our next question comes from George Butters in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And he asks, a hearing impaired colleague loves Zoom. He can finally hear clearly in a crowded meeting. Now he's back in the glass-walled conference rooms and getting in-person fatigue. He'd like to go back to Zoom, but is stuck in Hybrid-ville. Any suggestions?
Alex?
You're seeing a glimpse of the future. that as people go back to the conference rooms and they start doing hybrid rooms, people are going to be more and more sensitive to not wanting to go into hybrid meetings. The people remotely, especially, and some of us I have a really hard time in echoey rooms. I think it's that's a limitation of my personality is that when I hear a lot of things going on, I have a hard time focusing on anything. Why I don't go to bars that have bands or TVs. Anyway, so obviously I don't go to bars very often. So anyway, but I think that what we're seeing is there's a lot of people out there that want to have a focused conversation, and when you get good at doing it in Zoom, it's really hard to go back to the kind of unmanaged process that we lived in before.
Rupert?
When I first saw the question, my sort of instinct was to say, well, just ask to go back to Zoom, ask to go back to home or whatever. But of course, then the challenge is going to be that you're going to be listening to the same people in that room, probably over Zoom, and that's probably might be a bit of a challenge also. But even if you haven't got an impairment like that, I've seen these pictures, of being posted online, whatever, these conference rooms, and just the thought of sitting in long lines of people, not only hearing people, but half the time you can't see them because you've got to look down and strain your neck to see other people, the presentation. So I think the whole thing's pretty hopeless, really.
Jeffrey?
So I'm going on the fact that he's actually in the conference room with everybody else and not being on the Zoom call while everybody else is in the conference room. I found that hearing help, aids help, not as an aid, but this is Dubs. This actually cuts out about 20 dB of the room noise. So even AirPods Pro, putting those in, even if you're not in transparent or noise cancellation mode, will help kind of cut down all the other different sounds, especially the HVAC sounds that can come into any type of meeting room as you're holding any type of webinar, or not webinar, but conference or anything like that. So that's what I would suggest. And then of course, put on sunglasses if it's too bright. We'll see how that works.
Lois?
I think, I'm not sure, but I think that Zoom reduces background noise when a person is speaking. So I'm wondering if this person, since it's an audio problem, might not just log on to the meeting, no video, with something where they can have headphones, and then they'll be hearing it through the Zoom, but that might cut down on the background noise.
Pasco?
Kind of what I was going to say is just go ahead and ask the person who's in charge if they can get an access to the thing that's coming in over the Zoom. And then people do carry personal amplifiers these days. So with a set of Bluetooth headphones, you could actually have your own little mix going on and just do it for yourself.
All right, next question.
We're back to Dublin again for this question. James asks, I noticed when I did a fourth question today, it automatically bounces back to my notes. How does this new feature work?
Alex?
We've been working on a limiter to the system. So basically there's a slider on our end that says how many questions someone can have in the actual throughput system at one time. And so if you put more than that number in, it'll just push your question to notes. So you can still put it in later. The main thing that we found is that if someone asks, 10 questions or something like that at the beginning, it reduces the number other people feeling like they have space to ask questions. So it was just a behavior that we noticed, is that we first watched it for a little while of just what happens if two people ask 20 questions kind of thing. And what it does is the hard part is we have to remember is that there's a lot of people who are listening who they don't even know what Makana is. Like they don't know, and so suddenly it just becomes this, it disengages a lot of people from asking questions and feeling like they're part of the conversation, even from listening and feeling like it's just coming up from two people rather than one person or three people or whatever. So to keep that to keep that space open for people, we put in a limiter that we can decide on different types of shows. Oh, we're going to let 6 in, I didn't want to just set it at 3. I wanted to have we can scroll it to 6, or we can scroll it down to 1, or we can, and depending on what we're doing, we're going to keep on playing with that so that you can only have so many in a system. And that's really just to keep the diversity of the questions rolling, in that process, especially when someone's trying to figure something out. They have a tendency to ask, and I do the same thing, ask 6 questions about the same thing because they're trying to figure it out. And that is that may be good for them. It's not necessarily good for the whole audience that's listening. And so when you have 6 questions to ask, that's a great thing for after hours. When you have 1 that you're trying to figure out, or 2 that you're trying to figure out, or even 3, that's a place for office hours.
And that would be a great feature for education, like to keep the, the kid who always raises their hands at the front always first. It'll just kind of like, democratize the process.
I was always the kid. I was either in the front asking every single question, answering every single question, or I was in the back not paying attention. There was no in between.
I had to learn to be uncomfortable with the silence as a student and as a teacher. Like there's just that like, oh, no one's saying anything. I'll just raise my hand and throw in something and hopefully it'll spark something. So Rupert.
Maybe a workflow for this is to use the notes section entirely to compose and compile your questions, and then throw a couple in, and then just keep an eye on the question flow. And if there's a space there for a couple of the questions, and you can just put them in one by one. But if you use the notes expressly for that, then it's a good way to keep those in line. Maybe.
Good idea, Lois.
Well, this is back to Alex. If you've got a slider, can you change that in the middle of the show? Because we could start with anybody can put in 1, and then if we don't have enough questions, you make it 2 or 3.
I have to ask Chris. I think we can. I think it'll just be the next person that's there. I'll check that out. That's a really great idea, Lois. I mean, really.
Again, perfect for the classroom.
Yeah. If we can't, we will be able to, because that is a genius idea. Like that really makes a big difference. Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. Next question.
Our next question is from Tony Mobley in Newnan, Georgia. And he asks, is it time for Alex to do another keynote training in office hours so it can be captured on YouTube?
Alex?
Yeah, we'll schedule one soon. I'm scheduled out for a little while, so it'll be a little bit of time before I do that. But yeah, definitely we'll do another one soon. I do a presentation in Keynote every day right now, and as a result, I am I'm working with a lot of the new features, and so I think that it's good. I'll definitely do that.
All right, next question.
Our next question is from Douglas Carmichael, who asks, has anyone worked on productions in Russia or an ex-Soviet country? What challenges have you encountered?
Alex.
I've worked in a couple. One of the things that's not a challenge is that the folks that are there that we hire are incredibly technical and incredibly good at what they do. Like, it's just amazing. We did one in Hungary, which was not really Soviet Union, but a Soviet bloc country. And we couldn't believe it, how fast the guys we were working with picked up what we were handing them. We were handing them some pretty complex stuff, and they just did it. And they just did it like a machine. And then they taught each other how to do it, and they just moved forward. I think that the challenge that we get into is that with some of the older population, there's a sense of stand backish and a little bit of paranoia that seems to come with that culture. I mean, just what happened, and so everyone just kind of you have to kind of push through that a little bit to get them to be opened, because they're not used to that. But overall, level of execution in many of those countries is really high, so it's and we do a lot of 3D generation and coding out of Bulgaria because they're just really, really precise and technical.
All right, next question.
We go to Washington, D.C. for our next question, where Mark Giuliani asks, earlier in After Hours, Alex displayed some 3D photos of a wall. What camera and lens did he use, and how did he gather the 3D data?
Alex.
I used a 5D with a 24-70 lens locked at 24. So you can lock it. There's a lock in the 20 in that lens. And so I locked it at 24 millimeters, but just regular camera. So that was done years ago before the LiDAR was really available, in a camera. And it's just using Metashape to do it. But I'm planning to take that wall maybe this weekend, but definitely next week into the Apple's, photo, object capture, and start to play with taking all those. I realize I have 50 or 60 projects that I can throw into it just to see what it does. So I'm going to be toying with that. But right now, that was just old fashioned photos and Metashape.
All right, last question for today.
I think we might have time for a couple more.
Do we have a couple more?
Yeah.
Good. All right.
Okay, Douglas Carmichael has the next question, and he asks, I've participated in multiple accidental Belfasts, but how does Todd recruit crew for his Belfasts? It doesn't seem to be on the Discord.
TJ.
Todd mentioned this morning that due to the complexity of the integration between the audio and video, it's not something that just anybody could necessarily come in raw without a bit of knowledge.
All right. And Alex.
Yeah, they're trying to. I realized we were going into the second hour. Sorry about that. As far as bringing in, I think that with the Belfast method specifically, I mean, I think that everyone's doing it differently. I think that with Todd's, we hope to learn with what he's doing, as opposed to it's a pretty, very, very complex thing to do right now. And so I think that what we're going to do is take advantage of what he's learning or what they're learning over time as they share it with us. But I think that what they're trying to do is much harder than what we're doing in accidental theater. So, and I think that they just need to have a handful of people work on it for a little while. But I think we're all going to learn, hopefully, from what they're doing. You know, if you know, they'll hopefully push that back into the group as they figure this stuff out, or it'll no longer be a office hours project. so it'll be its own thing. So anyway, but hopefully we'll there's some places I think we're going to get to that point where some of these projects are great to learn from what people doing it, and some of the ones we're going to get to actually put our hands on, and it's just going to be a mixture of those. So that's all I'm going to say.
Lois?
Is there a place where it is known what projects are in existence? Because there are, every once in a while, somebody will say something and I'll go, oh, I didn't know about that.
Not yet. Working on it. Yeah. Yeah. So we're working on, there'll be a lot of places to have people have opportunities to work together in the next, over the next year. It'll get, my guess is there'll be, given what we did with Pixel Core, by the end of 2022, there'll probably be 300 to 500 people working on different things. So that's given the growth trajectory of what we've seen before.
Jeffrey?
Yeah, I totally agree on that. And yesterday in after hours, we were talking to somebody and I learned about outlanding. It's camping using your truck and going to locations that you don't normally
overlanding.
Overlanding, that's it. Yeah, thank you. And so we were talking about his show, and we said, well, what if somebody came by and put the Belfast method into that? And he liked the idea, but it's really about having the cycles to do that, and of course the gear and knowledge to do that. So anything can happen.
And I just want to say one last thing about that is that we will close up certain ones. Like Office Hours 2.0 is going to be really open to a lot of people, anyone who wants to do it. And there'll be a time when we say, well, we can't do that because there's too many people watching. So you want to take advantage of ones that are opened. Office Hours 2.0 will be pretty open at the very beginning, and then there'll be, as we pull out projects, those projects will have different rankings. Like this is one anybody can join. This is one you have to have experience. This is one you have to have. Like there'll be different things depending on what the level of those projects look like. So that'll change over time, just because some of the projects will probably have a lot of people watching, and at that point we want people who are experienced, to do it. So that'll and able to work inside those teams. And so just as we start to roll these out over the next quarter, my recommendation is to jump in early. get into it. And Tony's yeah, go ahead, Tony. Sorry.
Oh.
Sorry, I'll step out of the way, Emily. Sorry, I stepped on Emily's.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the Mobley process is open, and we are still looking for people who want to learn what we're doing with Video 360. So just want to let you guys know.
And Roscoe?
I was just going to throw one out there. I know that we're actually going to compete against SpaceX. There's a project coming up in March, so pay attention. And if you're really into flying things high, stick around. It's going to get interesting.
Cool. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our first hour. So we are going to stop the YouTube feed. If you're joining us on YouTube, you can hop on over. Waving. Okay, sorry. You can hop on over to the actual Zoom meeting and be able to join us and continue with the Educator Hour by YouTube.